Awesome. So, can you just like quickly explain to me what you're getting at about objectivity, especially in regards to morality? Because somebody kind of stun locked me in a conversation because they said something that I still can't really wrap my head around, but it must be some sort of presupposition that I have that is making it difficult for me to understand. So I guess can you just walk through what you mean by like objective morality, or like when you're saying good or bad, like what is the power of being objective?
Excuse me. So objective usually means it kind of hand in hand. These are orthogonal distinctions, and you can read more about these online. But the way I use them, I usually use objective just interchangeably with just moral realism. The idea that it's also mind independent. Some philosophers use that differently, but that's just the way I was taught, and I'm kind of partial to it. Um, I'm open to changing the terminology, but that's the thing in philosophy. It's like, oh, I'm going to stipulate this definition to mean this. That's fine. People do that, but so if we're doing that, then I stipulate that unless there's better candidates out there and people want to correct me on this, which I'm open to, just by objective, I just mean more realism, and I mean more realism in the sense of being mind independent.
Okay.
Probably I would correct that. I think objective also, yeah, I know there's some nuance there, but just that's the uncorrected version.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay. I'm going to throw, I guess, like an idea for a moral framework at me or
Mm-hmm.
at you. And then you kind of tell me if this falls in line with what you're talking about. This is something that
Okay.
I explained to Lance as well when I had him on my show. And I understood what he was saying, but there was like a power thing that I was trying to understand from him. So I'll just explain this to you and you let me know if this makes sense
Yeah.
or, what you think about this. So to me, it seems like I would say that morality in like a colloquial sense isn't super objective, but there are objective efficiencies in completing a goal. So like when you have a stated goal, if my goal was to be happy, whether or not I know what it is, whether or not anybody can know what it is, it seems like there is an objectively efficient way to reach that goal. And then that is objective. And so then when you ask the question about morality, you're basically trying to achieve a goal, which is maybe like fulfillment or whatever you'd want to posit that goal is. And then you can have an objective path towards that goal. And so when you're talking about morality, to me, it seems like all humans are wired in some way, or maybe you could say something like 99.99% of humans are wired
Mhm. Yeah.
to avoid pain and pursue pleasure. So you can maybe build this complex system of morality that is, these are objectively more and less efficient ways to pursue pleasure and
Yeah.
avoid pain in some kind of way. And then that can ground your morality. Um, I have
What can I ask?
examples when
What do
it
you
comes
mean
to
by
things, but
hold on? What do you mean by morally good ways? Wouldn't they just be pragmatic? Like,
yeah,
be
it'll
just
be
specific. Okay.
pragmatic. Yeah. So it'd just be like,
So,
what is
okay.
objectively most efficient at achieving
Right. Okay.
these things? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
Okay.
that's
Sorry.
the
Go ahead.
general framework. I can answer questions if you have some, because I wouldn't say this is super consequentialist. Like I wouldn't say that it
Yeah.
has to be successful. It just has to attempt at it. And then you can get into like probabilities. So like something might have a genuine probability of causing pleasure or pain. That might be, we might not be able to know it, but the attempt at that might be able to tell you. So that's like the general groundwork. To me, this seems pretty close to objective, as in it exists outside of, I guess, what you would want morality to be. But if all of our brains changed in the way that they functioned, and now, pain is
Yeah.
way different to experience, then that would change, I guess, what is moral if like pain changed via a certain way, something like that. So it's kind of subjective,
Yeah.
but I just want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is consistent with normative ethical theories like hedonism, of course, utilitarianism, even virtue ethics, that you seek pleasure and uh, you know run from pain. Um, so it's highly consistent with all those. But you're wanting to just to get this correct, you wanting to say that it can ground morality, like you would get objectivism by this. But I'm wondering, like, you describe a scenario where you have pragmatic normativity, like if I do this, then I will get this. My goals, my means to end reasoning. But I don't hear anything about morality in there. You know what I mean? And if you're going to say, well, well, you need to do it in a morally good way. Well, then like you're building the morality into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's the big connection that I'm struggling with a little bit is kind of like this power. So like you could
Yeah.
say that it is objectively inefficient to all humans to murder people. Um, and then that gets you somewhat of the same answer that like morality would say is that it's immoral to murder people. You're getting like a very synonymous answer to me. And I just wonder like, it's not exactly morality, but like it aligns, you could work it in a way to align so closely with morality that it seems like essentially the same thing to me.
My earbud just died on me, so there might be a little bit of echo here. But say what you said. Last thing you said.
Yeah. So like to me, it seems like morality tries to say something along the lines of like it is morally bad to murder somebody, but in this like efficiency morality you could just say that it is against the wishes of all people. It is objectively against the wishes and efficiency of all people to murder, therefore we shouldn't murder. So you get the same answer, and then it you can kind of intuitively see that the paths are similar, but there's something there's something meaningfully different there. To me, it seems very synonymous, maybe not the exact same, but like close enough. And I just when people press me for like an even higher standard of objectivism, I'm starting to like lose what that is.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like Kantian normative theory, but that's a normative theory. You know what I mean? Like the categorical imperative. Like, but this is the hypothetical imperatives we're assuming. Like if you want a highly functioning, well-run society, I suppose it doesn't collapse, then you probably ought not to murder people. That's a normative thing, though. So are you assuming that like are you familiar with Kantian theory, like
You
Kantianism?
know, in general, yes, if you explained
Okay.
it
Yeah.
in this
Well,
context, that would
the idea
help.
is just like so the categorical imperative is not just if you reach these goals, that it's just like there is no antecedent. It's not a hypothetical imperative, but it's categorical, like meaning you ought to do this, this, or this, and it's universalizable. Kant thought that you could derive morality from rationality. So but I don't think that project worked. And I think also, yeah, I think there are some good objections to it if we wanted to discuss Kant in a future thing, but I'd have to refresh myself on those objections. But yeah, to my memory, there are some really good objections against that. But regardless, that's Kant's view. But it sounds almost exactly like what you're describing here. It's like if we could find some really rational ground or pragmatic ground where everybody just does the same thing, we can universalize that. Then that would be an objective, moral, like meta-ethical view. But it's
Yeah.
interesting because like I've never heard it in conversations. I'm not familiar with this enough, but I've never really heard it in conversations. Um, well, I can imagine, I can think freshly here, the stuff I've not heard, but that you can immediately get from Kantianism to moral objectivism. I wonder if you get Kantianism. I wonder if it can leave subjective. I wonder if it's consistent with subjectivism, but that's something I have to look up.
Yeah, I guess you can kind of see the similarities though, like when you look at it, to me it just doesn't seem like a super big leap. I remember explaining this to somebody and they said something like, "But it's not objective," is what they're saying. And to me, it's really interesting. I'm trying to wonder what that leap is. They were I mean, objective in the sense that God defines what is good and what is bad, but they were saying that this hadn't met whatever threshold for morality. But to me, it seems like morality can be somewhat easily explained within somebody's own perspective. Like it's like subjectivist in that like, um, I could say from what your goals are, you do not think that this is efficient at those goals. And from what your goals are, if everybody were to do it, if extrapolated to everybody, would also be inefficient to your goals as well. Therefore, you shouldn't do it. And you can make like a normative claim, like shouldn't. And then morality, to me, for I feel like for subjectivists, morality is mostly a should or shouldn't. Like I feel like subjectivists kind of fall into this camp in some way. But I guess I just
Yeah. Um, so a couple of things. So I do think you do get objectivity because just technically speaking, it's just going to be mind independence. That's what that is. Um,
So these oughts are not these normative, you know, principles which hold upon you or whatever. They are not dependent upon minds. It's just like, it's no one person's subjective opinion. It's just, these are universalizable and so on. So in that sense, they're mind independent, I suppose. And so they're objectivist, if you want to be technical about it. However, I would back it up even further, though. I don't know if you're even describing morals, like to me, it just sounds like a means to end reasoning, pragmatism, the idea that, I mean, you could do that, but then you're not, I think you're being a reductionist about morality, because not all morality is about meeting my goal. You know what I mean? Like, what's it called? Altruism, right? Like, I may be sacrificing my goals, unless you want to be like really uncharitable to people who are sacrificial and altruistic and be like, oh, they're just doing it for their goals. Like, no, nobody, like, I don't think I'd go that
I might lean a little bit. I might lean a little bit there, actually.
But that's the thing. You would have to bite the bullet and be like, yeah, even that. But I think you have moral issues that can't be described just by meeting your goals. And I think you can obviously meet your goals that the way you've described them in a pragmatic way and it not be a moral issue. So I think you don't have necessary or sufficient conditions for it.
I guess, not to necessarily put you on the spot, but could you give me some examples of like a system that would logically, flow towards this efficiency status, but not meet the criteria for like a moral system? Because I would make the claim that like altruistic things are good because when you help other people, when you sacrifice your own stuff to help other people, it might come back to you. You're encouraging a community. I think I was trying to make some sort of like measurable thing that there are like 3 types of consequences of an action. There's like individual consequences, social consequences, and global consequences. So like the social consequence of helping other people is that socially it encourages an environment that might get to help you in the future. Like a global or a global consequence, I'd have to think about that for a second. But then like a solo consequence, this gets like really deep and into the weeds. But like by sacrificing something, you are challenging yourself, which will promote growth within you, which will make you more, uh, you know, more resistant to challenges in the future because you've self-inflicted challenges. Or like by giving to other people and sacrificing with yourself, you've become a more uh, aware person, which allows you to tackle the problems within your own life easier because you understand the problems of other people. And I imagine there's some sort of global thing that like, if everybody helped people, it would help you, or the opposite. If everybody didn't help people, then, I think it's like soul theory. You can't decide which soul you're going to be born into. You should probably make the best environment for all souls, something like that. So those are like the 3 aspects. And I just wonder if there's like a logical consequence that you could find that couldn't be explained in this moral context with like those 3 consequences.
Are you asking, so I'm not sure what it is you're asking, because are you asking that, like, if I set up this pragmatic means to end reasoning, like, I think, yeah, I admit that you get effects that are moral. Like, we're all going to do things that achieve our goals. Let's say means to end reasoning. I want to do things that I can find success. Okay, I'm going to do this thing. Yeah, that's going to have moral effects, moral consequences on people. But like, I don't know if you can embed that into the actual normative claim that you get from that condition. Like, if I want to do this, I'm doing that. That's pragmatic. That's not moral itself. It's going to have moral outcomes and consequences and effects on people. But like the normative claim itself is not moral. Am I understanding this right? I'm just asking to clear things up.
Yeah, you're hitting on what I am imagining is the problem whenever I bring this up to people, is that like there's some sort of secret sauce about morality. Like I already know I'm not describing morality in a conventional way. Like I know that when people are talking about morality, they're talking about maybe something deeper than this, something that like motivates actions. I feel like the way that I'm describing it is descriptive and prescriptive, in that like it's descriptive that people are somewhat guided by their avoidance of pain and their pursuit of pleasure. But it's also prescriptive that they should do they should do certain things that also fit with that description. Like you can say something even a little bit stronger, like it's built within us in our brains in a way that I am not sure can be avoided right now, that we are guided by those two things. Therefore, you should do these
Yeah.
things.
So I think to me, I'm a virtue ethicist, so this all sounds completely consistent with that. Also consistent with hedonism, so on and so on, desire satisfactionism. But a virtue ethicist, like, so I'm an objectivist as well. I'm more realist about that. And that's completely consistent with that view. I'm not saying that it's not consistent with yours, but like, I would just explain that. I mean, I totally buy what you're saying, but that's because I can explain it really easily in my view. It's just there is this moral standard, and God gives the natural law as a Christian theist, like, and those things, you know, they're going to have natural consequences for us, and some of them are moral consequences, and some of the natural law is moral law, and so, yeah, so that would be completely consistent, and we're driven by pleasures and pains. I said that earlier in the stream. It's been a while, but even Aristotle thought this, even Plato thought this, Aquinas thought this. We're driven by pleasures and pains. It's like just a basic understanding of human psychology. It's like basically it's like a descriptive hedonism, not a
Yeah.
not a ethical hedonism. But yeah,
Yeah.
so but you're suggesting that because of these observations that you can derive a meta-ethical view. I'm not so sure. I have to think more about that.
Yeah, I would encourage that a little bit, just because I want answers. Like,
Because here's the thing, because like if you can derive a moral ethical view from that, then so can everyone else who accepts this. You see what I mean? Like then that makes the virtue ethicist opens the door to be like, yeah, now I have a moral objectivity just because like just said I did. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like,
sure.
you see what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
I think what you're describing is like the normative level, but I don't see, at least not yet. I'm not sure how easily it applies to the meta ethical.
Yeah, I think one of the difficult parts and the pushback that I get the most is that it doesn't necessarily imply that people are aware of these consequences, or it might even be possible that finding the actual equations that, would theoretically map out to all these things are impossible to find. And so like the morality exists theoretically, but will never exist within our own, perceptions and our own paradigms. But that's really interesting. My
That's
next
true.
step,
Yeah.
Yeah. And because a lot of people bring up things like slavery, like, well, if it was about pleasure and pain, then how was slavery allowed? And it's like, well, we can be incorrect about how those things bear out. But during the times of slavery, it was objectively true that slavery was against the wishes of all people. They just didn't know it yet. Or a loud minority of people convinced them that that was the case. Something along those lines. My next step.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead. If you ever thought about that.
Yeah, and that does risk the problem of being arbitrary then. Yeah, because some people will find pleasure in things, other people don't, but you're wanting to strive for like a universalizable pleasure, But
Yeah.
like think for example, like it's pleasurable to sit on your phone in front of your face in your bed. Like I'm not gonna meet my goals, but at least I'm getting pleasure. I'm getting the dopamine. You see what I mean? It's like, and that seems universalizable. And also it's not although it's a pleasure example, it's not really an explicitly moral example. Like the virtue theorist would be like, yeah, it's a moral example because it builds or destroys your character.
Yeah,
It
sure.
builds or destroys virtue. Yeah, but it's going to be hard to find and pinpoint, but that could be worked out in the details, I suppose.
No, exactly. And that's the problem, is that every example you give is going to be fought with this like massive calculation that's almost imperceivable to people about like,
Right. That's the same problem with utilitarianism, like trying to find the consequences for everybody. I mean, because like it's not the same with like hedonism. Hedonism is just like indexed to the agent, but utilitarianism, depending on what the utility is, could be pleasure. And in that case, like you need to know about how everybody's affected by the pleasure. And like that's one of the actual massive objections to utilitarianism, is that you as a moral agent trying to decide what to do can't calculate all those things. So it's utilitarianism is actually impossible in principle to figure out what to do, which is kind of paradoxical because it seemed at the beginning to be like this really plug and play solution, like just choose the best, but like you can't, in fact.
Sure. Yeah, and that's one of the difficulties, but the stuff you get from saying that something is objective, though, is that like that's kind of how you would expect it to be. If it was objective, the universe doesn't owe us an easily explainable universe. You know what I mean? If it were to be objective, it's just how it is, and we have to accept that. One of the things, though, is the next step is that you were talking about natural law. I don't think God has to exist for this to exist. I guess in that, like, if God, like, our universe would be the exact same morality wise if God existed and if God didn't exist. Now, we definitely would have come to different conclusions because I think Christianity specifically did wonders for teaching people about what to do and what not to do. I think it aligns almost perfectly with how I would maybe construct a system of morality. I think Christianity does a wonderful job of doing this,
Yeah,
but
me
I don't
too.
think it's necessary. I imagine you do.
I think
But I don't
it
think it's necessary.
like, I think if you're an abductive reasoner about these things, like inference is the best explanation, you're just like, okay, kind of fit in and all the pieces and everything. It's really hard to dismiss Christianity for all the holes that it fills. Just, yeah, and especially in the moral realm. Like, you can be nitpicky. I know people who are hearing me, just as an sidebar here, you can be nitpicky about, prohibitions in the Old Testament and all that, and actions and so on. But like, when lived out practically, and the moral theory that it's developed over the centuries, like, that's what all of Western civilization is built on, and it's really hard to say that there's a better alternative.
Yeah, and it's really effective too. And so what I always encourage people to do is like it point something out to me and I'll let you know like what do I imagine the moral consequences of this thing are. Now I know there are a couple things that I don't know how educated I know a lot of people bring up verses about slavery, a lot of people bring up verses about like women should not speak. And some of these other things. Now that would take some more particular eyes on to see what it's saying. But I mean, when you look at things like the 10 Commandments, or you look at just some of the stated rules, like just the literal, like you should, love your neighbor, stuff like that. Like these are all really good moral techniques.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and they also, when contrasted with the context in which they first appeared and grew up in, like the Greco-Roman value system, like that was all about like conquest and power and glory and honor and all these things, when Christianity is more concerned with like compassion and humility and sacrifice and all those things, like that those are completely different systems. And so, yeah, I mean, and there's there, like I said, yeah, just to agree with you, you can be nitpicky about those things. But what I'm referring to is like the moral tradition that arose up out of it, not like cherry picked examples that people will give.
sure. No, exactly. And sometimes I don't love to attribute it all. Like sometimes, because the problem is that to me, this is the objective right answer, whether the Bible exists or not. So like if Plato came up with everything that the Bible says, I would be like, good job, Plato. You
Yeah.
created morality,
Yeah,
So
that's fair. Yeah.
yeah. Now I do have, this might be a little controversial. You just shut me down if you find this the case. I guess, how do you feel about like, morality in terms of like gay marriage or like homosexuality and stuff? I know that that's a controversial one, but to me, I feel like you can somewhat explain this on a moral thing, but I guess from your perspective, how do you kind of explain this in terms of morality?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking the brilliant questions here. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm Catholic, so I hold a Catholic view.
And then I guess one of the important things about this is that religiously, you should have what I always press religious people to have is you have a logical foundation, like maybe some consequential foundation for why you follow the rules or why people should follow the rules, that is then supported by your religion, that is then supported by God. But if you have a moral system and then it changes when God is out of the picture, did you really have a moral system? Like if I'm following the Bible and then it is proven to be somehow that God is not real, and all of a sudden I change all of the things that I'm doing, that seems somewhat immoral. So I guess what I would challenge you to have is maybe some sort of logical explanation as to why you follow the rules that you do that is then supported by God or that is then supported by the Bible.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, Catholic sexual ethics. If you look into this, there's some really great literature on this. It's called Theology of the Body as well. Saint Pope John Paul II, who was alive during my time. I don't know if you were probably alive for him as well, but he died recently, like 2005 or something. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
he late 90s had this whole literature on theology of the body and revived it. I mean, it was still there. And another professor of mine, Alex Proust, I've mentioned him earlier, on stuff like infinity, and he's got a PhD in philosophy, but also a PhD in mathematics. Like he's Catholic, and so he does theology of the body of stuff as well. He's got a book called One Body. It's really, really good. And he's got really great arguments in there that are not just like, hey, God said it, so now we do it. It's also, I mean, Proust is a philosopher, and he's a brilliant one. He's probably one of the only people living that I would say is a genius. So I dole that term out like very lightly. And so of all living people that I've met, at least know personally, I would say that of him, but not very many people. And yeah, if you look up, it's called One Body by Alex Proust, Pruss, and he's Polish. And he's got some really great arguments on homosexuality, on bestiality, on contraception, on abortion, just on fornication, like sleeping outside of marriage. Basically anything that you can think of, like it's in there. So even stuff about like stuff within marriage, like all of it's in there, and it expands upon Catholic sexual teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's really interesting. I think sometimes that helps. There's like the classic atheist argument that's like, how do you know out of all of the religions that yours is the one that's right when they're all claiming to say something similar? What I find that a lot of Christians struggle to admit is that what they're doing is they're doing some sort of logical calculation historically, but also on like the moral level. So like I remember one guy talking to me about his conversion from Hinduism to Christianity he was saying that reincarnation kind of posits a moral system that he doesn't think is like fair or like true. You know what I mean? It like encourages you to not live for goodness in the one life because you might get to, do it again. It like has a weird moral implication. And that's kind of what brought him away. Now, what a lot of people do when they're deciding which religion is correct is they are testing the consequences of the moral systems. You know what I mean? I'm not super well versed in other religions, but I wonder if you have, like thoughts on that kind of concept, because you really do have to moralize the things that you're preaching from the Bible, unrelated to the Bible, and then you can bring it in later.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought much about this. The one place I often teach on this, one place is in C.S. Lewis's work, talks about the 3 parts of morality. And so he explains just this that you're describing. And I think he gets it. He inherits it from Aquinas, actually. But the idea is that you would, there's 3 ways that the moral life can go wrong. One is like person to person. I can harm you. I can also harm myself. That's the second way. Like I could hurt my character and morally harm myself in some ways, lie to myself and so on. But then the third way is like, why are we doing this at all? Like where's the ship headed? So he uses this analogy of the fleet of ships. Like the ships shouldn't bump into one another. That would provide a successful voyage. But also the second part, your steering gear and your sails should all be in working order. So, but having that helps you not bump into the other ships because they're mutually reinforcing. But also like there's that, where are you going? Like your voyage would be a disaster if you were supposed to arrive in New York and you ended up in Calcutta, India. Like no matter how well you sailed. So like this is what any worldview needs to answer is like, I could be nice, I could be a good person, I could do all those things, but like, why am I doing it? And so it's not just the idea of, well, so I can get into heaven, but it's like, it's even deeper than that. So he gives some examples. He's like, if Christianity is true, it's actually a part of the larger book called Mere Christianity, which began as like radio talks during the World War II. And he says, if Christianity is true, then it's making claims about reality. And then those claims would also be true. Like it says that people will live forever. So that matters for what I do now. Like if I only live like 80 years, he says, then, being a little angry person, for 80 years, not that bad. A little change here and there. It's going to be incremental change. But if I live for eternity, then those incremental changes are going to add up. And I'm going to become a person that just is hellish to be around, And then he says, on that point, he's like, hell is the exact word they use to describe. He holds this view of hell that's like, it's of our own making. It's not necessarily a fire or brimstone place, but it's this idea that you are separated from God because you only want to be near him. And then you become what you hate in a sense. So yeah, so these moral, the worldview, like Hinduism, like you mentioned, like Christianity, whatever the worldview may be, greatly influences like what our moral, what our normative stuff is, even what our metaethical stuff is, and like why we do the things we engage each other, and why I'm losing it. But let this be the last thing. I'll let you reply, and then we'll probably have to wrap it up. But yeah,
no problem. I was about to say that's pretty much the essence of the point I was trying to get across. I'm going to continue to kind of bring this up. I actually was surprised by the lack of, not necessarily pushback, but just the lack of, instant disagreements that you would have. I know that I brought this up to a lot of Christians, and they really struggle to separate, like the ordained morality versus like the logical morality, the natural law. Like I think even a lot of people a lot of Christians struggle to even admit that natural law exists. Now,
yeah, I think
something like that.
I think just people in general, because I will also get the same frustration with atheists, because they'll say, "Oh, you're just going to be good because God tells you to be good." No, like there's this whole concept of natural law, the natural moral law, that like there are natural consequences for what I do. If I want to be a terrible person, I'm going to turn into a terrible person. I'm going to do terrible things, and that has consequences for me. So I think it's not just Christians, although you're right, it is Christians, but it's just anybody in general. I think they don't grasp that these religious texts aren't the only source. I mean, in Christian thinking, you have general revelation and special revelation. Special revelation is just scripture, like when God speaks specifically and reveals himself specifically. General revelation is like available to anybody. So like that's why we have the conscience. That's why we have the natural law, and conscience accesses the natural law and the moral law. So yeah, and this is available to anybody. It's not special to anybody. And so I think people just don't have a good understanding of the both.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people, and I'll leave it at this, but I think a lot of people like to imagine that they're choosing their morality. And then when you talk about an objective morality, it kind of makes them uncomfortable, because it's like, no, I'm being good because I want to be good. And then an argument like this, or even an argument that a lot of Christians would posit, is that, well, no, you're being good because of some other reason, because it's good for you. It's good for everybody if you're good, something like that. And I think a lot of people just struggle to accept or even understand that their morality isn't necessarily chosen. It might just be the case that that's good to do, or effective to do. So yeah, Derek, you're awesome. I love watching your YouTube journey. I'm gonna get back on the horse once I go down to Oklahoma and start my PhD. So you'll
Good.
see.
Yeah. Well, congrats
You'll see
again
the
on
podcast
that.
continues.
It's a PhD at OU in psychology, right?
Yes.
Clinical or
social
research?
psychology. Social psychology. Yeah.
Social. Okay. Cool.
So
All
we're
right,
doing
well,
the research and stuff.
Great to have you on. Come on earlier, because I'm like, I lose steam after about
No,
an hour and a half or so.
I
It's
just
the
saw
longest
that
time
you
I've
were
ever
on
done
there.
a stream. So
I know this is a 3-hour. I'm gonna start doing
it
this
is.
too
It is
sometime.
enough.
This sounds really
So,
fun.
and I'll apologize to everybody waiting. We'll end it there, Elijah.
It's a good problem to have.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Come back.
See you, Derek.
See ya.